Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Turin here with another Warhammer Total War online commentary. In this particular battle, I'll be playing the Dwarves, and you can see Grombrindle here is already looking crazy. He's ready to party, and I got some fun stuff in store for you guys. So let's go ahead and get right down to the business. So I'm actually going to be playing, as I mentioned, the Dwarves, and I'm going to be facing off against the Vampire Counts, or more specifically, their new sub-faction. I believe he is using the Red Duke over here, so we'll get a chance to see him in action as well. So as far as my front line goes, I just have standard, rank and file Longbeards on the outskirts. So I have one group here and one group here, because typically people aren't going to charge their cav into the center of your formation. So having, the Longbeards with great weapons in the middle, just kind of saturate among the front line and help deal with, what I was thinking to be Graveguard, but he actually had a fairly unique army. I mean, it's mostly skeleton warriors, and in terms of armor piercing, I believe he does have these Vargulfs here. We do have regeneration, armor piercing, but they actually have really low leadership. If you guys look, they only have 40, so they can crumble pretty darn quick. But anyways, we'll get back to his army in just a moment. So that's my front line there. In the wings here, I got two runesmiths. So one of the runesmiths has the full suit. He has, all the runes and the augmentations that are pertinent, with the exception of the Master Rune of Grungni. I also have Grombrindle here. He does have the flash bomb, and Grombrindle has no fear. I didn't bring the rune axe. I've been wanting to experiment a little bit with it and, see if it's worth bringing. But again, he's just kind of got his standard gear here. He's ready to go. Does magic damage, hits like a truck. Very good against the Vampire Counts, in my opinion. And then here, guys, this is where the fun stuff begins. I do have Iron Drakes with Trollhammer torpedoes. So these used to be one of my go-to units against the Vampire Counts. I just had so much fun bombing the Mortis engines, corpse carts, all those kind of things. And if you could protect them, they can really, really pay off well for you. But it's definitely going to be tricky with the Red Duke and some of these monstrous units out and about. But we will see how they do. Back here, of course, I have the Grumbling Guard with Longbeards, and then another standard group of Longbeards with great weapons. It's pretty important. Vampire Counts can have fairly diverse armies, so you have to really account for a lot of things. I mean, they can go with, Graveguard, and then, standard Graveguard in the front, and then Graveguard with great weapons in the back, wherein these guys will really, really shine. But if they go with Crypt Horrors, these guys don't do as well against them, so kind of supplementing these guys with some, standard Longbeards up front, and Rune of Wrath and Rune, of course, is a great supplement against those as well. But having the Dragonback Slayers here, more importantly, is very, very good against those Crypt Horrors. So in the back, I also do have the Warriors of Dragonfire Pass, who do the flame damage, so it's quite good against a lot of the Vampire Counts units that are susceptible to fire damage. So let's go ahead and actually look. The Red Duke, I'm trying to see if he has a fire vulnerability. I actually don't see it down there, but I know a lot of the units on the Vampire Counts roster do indeed have that. So that's it for my army. Let's go ahead and get to my opponent's army. So he has two Vargulfs over here. So these guys, aside from the poor leadership, are pretty good. In this, I guess they're okay in this matchup. I wouldn't say they excel. They do have armor piercing. They're very quick with 80 move speed, so it's pretty hard to keep up with them. If you don't have slayers or things like that, they can really run amok. But they do have low leadership, so if you're able to really pressure them aggressively, they'll crumble very, very quickly. So he does have one on this wing, one on this wing. It looks like he's going to be kind of circumventing. But again, in most of my dwarf builds, I actually don't bring ranged units. I kind of just have a dwarf Death Star. I didn't opt for the kind of the gyrocopter style of that, but I prefer the infantry builds and then use the Rune of Wrath and Rune and maybe a single group of like Iron Drakes or Thunders or something like that to supplement. And the rest of his army is actually skeleton warriors, so just fodder. They're shielded, so assuming I did have Coilers, which he was probably expecting, they would be okay. Decent fodder unit. He has a Stearnsman, of course, and then over here he has, I believe he has a group somewhere of Graveguard with great weapons. We'll go ahead and find them shortly. He has a Necromancer here. It looks like he's on the Corpse Cart. I think that's the Balefire one, which provides some attack stats to all these fodder units here. Then he has a Banshee to cause terror, but thankfully most of my army is immune to psychology. But yeah, there's the Graveguard with great weapons. He has the Stearnsman, Vargulfs, Skeleton Warriors, all that fun business. And then he does have the Red Duke, who's pretty cool. He does have 450 armor piercing damage. Pretty strong. He has Lore of Vampires, and it looks like he brought Raised Dead, which, as you guys probably have seen, it has been modified because, again, the Raised Dead, the zombies fade fairly quickly, but now they get more charges of it. So you guys will get to see that in action. And yeah, I can't actually quite mouse over that. For some reason, it detaches. But I know the Red Duke does have some abilities. Hopefully, we'll get to see them in action this game. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So, of course, in the traditional Vampire Count style, he's just going to march forward. Doesn't have much of a choice in the matter, but, he has a very, very widespread army. And kind of the benefit of that is it can envelop. So if I did have, an army that was, let's say, comprised of ranged units and cannons and things like that, having, an army this wide is kind of scary because they can really wrap around you in a circle and they can obstruct a lot of your missile fire and things like that. But on that same note, if I have a very dense kind of center-focused army, it can kind of push through this thin front line pretty well. But he does have a Necromancer here, and let's see what the Necromancer has. It looks like he has Invocation from the Heck. So again, it's going to, take some time to get through, all of this fodder. But the Longbeards, the Warriors of Dragonfire Pass, all do pretty well. But dealing with these Vargulfs will be tricky. But If I'm able to get some decent focus fire with these Iron Drakes here, I think that will give me a pretty good chance, because these guys do, yeah, it doesn't look like, yeah, they have an anti-large bonus, it says on their tooltip, and then they also have armor-piercing missiles, and they do have 120 armor, though they come in a few models, they're pretty tanky. So I actually get my Master Engineer here. I forgot to point out, but I have him, the entrenchment ability, and then also the 12% weapon damage buff. So I just kind of run these guys up. I figured, hey, let's just get a cheap pot shot while I can, and then just run them back. So you can see it's going to fire here. Look at the damage it does. It's actually pretty darn good. It takes that Necromancer down about 30-40%. They quickly realize that they're in the open and they have to scurry back behind the lines. But they got their brother Dawi back here ready to support them. Of course, Grombrindle is crazy. He's ready to party, and he's swinging. I love when he swings around his axe. It's one of my favorite animations here. So I do form a little kind of defensive perimeter. I get the Warriors with Dragonfire Pass here. Then over here, I do have the Grumbling Guard. Just kind of putting them where I have to, essentially. And I believe my Slayers are in position. They're ready to go here as well. So we'll go ahead and look in the front line. It looks like we've engaged. The Longbeards with great weapons, thankfully, are indeed on the Sternsman, which is good. And you can see the Iron Drake torpedoes are still shooting in there, doing really good damage. They punish that Necromancer. But my opponent very well played using his summon ability. And it looks like, oh, that must be what the Red Duke does, is summon Skeleton Warriors rather than zombies. So very cool. So he summons some Skeleton Warriors, and unfortunately I just pulled my nearest unit, which were Slayers, which you do not want to be wasting your Slayers on these guys. But I was able to reform these guys here, and you can see they're already taking pot shots up at the Red Duke. And look at the damage it does. So far, these Iron Drakes have already, really punished this Necromancer back here. He's really low. He's almost crumbling. And they've also put a little bit of pressure on the Red Duke. So my opponent did get his Vargulf back here, so I did have to pull the Slayers back, because the Vargulf is going to do pretty well here. It's lightly armored, so my armor piercing isn't going to do great against it. So as soon as my Slayers come, though, my opponent, very, very well played on his part. He pulls it back, uses the Skeletons to kind of catch my blob. Thankfully, I was able to re-secure, but then, he still has these summon units kind of hammering away, but they're not going to get through the 120 armor of these Iron Drakes any day. So, and you guys can see that the cooldown on that summon is pretty short. So he has another group of Skeletons. You can see this Master Engineer here is just trying to beat them back with his hammer, and he's definitely not having a good time. He does have a Vargulf in here as well, and it's definitely pressuring me a lot. It's fast, it's hard to keep up with, and though I do have the capabilities of keeping up with it, the fact that all these Skeleton Warriors are constantly being summoned, it makes it very hard for my units to maneuver around the backfield. So thankfully some Slayers and these Longbeards with great weapons are able to clean up this group here. And I'm able to re-posture up these Iron Drakes, so they are kind of getting caught up by Skeletons here and there, but they should be able to start shooting shortly. And I am using the Rune of Wrath and Rune to try and clear up this fodder as fast as I can to free up my Master Engineer and get Grombrindle kind of being a little bit more efficient. But I do use the Flash Bomb there to try and catch that Banshee. And you can see the Banshee, it's usually pretty decent, but Grombrindle, guys, he does do magic damage. So with 70 melee attack and that heavy hitting, Grombrindle is just the absolute punisher of Banshees. And my opponent, very wisely using his Vargulfs here to kind of just jump on my Runesmiths, and they do have armor piercing, so they can do pretty well. But also just continuing to pressure those Iron Drakes. So every chance I get, I'm just trying to run these guys around and get them away from his heroic units. So thankfully I was able to clean up back there, so those units will be re-engaging here shortly. And I am starting to run the Iron Drake torpedoes back, but again, the new summoning mechanics of the zombies, you can just spam those things. So he has the Necromancer with the summoning, as well as the Red Duke, I believe. If I'm not mistaken, you guys correct me if I'm wrong. I've never seen him played before. So he is just chain summoning, and these guys are just constantly scurrying. But, all it takes for these guys to be effective is just 1 or 2 volleys of shots, and they can really put down heroic units, which are otherwise a huge threat. So you can see Papa Grombrindle over here. He's getting ready to slay this Banshee. And once he makes some solid contact, you can see that one hit hits for about, 40% of its HP. So I'm guessing, 1 or 2 more hits. And it looks like, yeah, he literally is going to 3-shot this Banshee. So he gets in there and just absolutely slays that thing. So definitely, his role, he's doing his job for sure. Then he gets in there, just he lays the beat down on that Graveguard there. And then he realizes that there's some bigger threats to be faced. So back here, I do have the Iron Drakes kind of online, and they're able to just punish the Red Duke. I wish I had been able to show you guys that. But 1 or 2 volleys from these guys with their anti-large, and he is armored, so they definitely, had no problem piercing his armor, and they take a volley there, just all up in the sky, and the Red Duke is going to be crumbling. His leadership just tanks to -28, and they're able to chase him off. But he does have one last-ditch effort. Was that the Necromancer or the Red Duke that summons? Could have sworn he summoned Skeletons. Might be a little loopy right now, but you can see the Duke taking the plunge over there, and that Runesmith laughing at him all the way. So the Slayers, not the best use, but I didn't want these Iron Drakes to get shut down, so I just pulled these guys over to block these, and I used a Rune of Wrath and Rune. That Vargulf came out of nowhere. I really underestimated its speed. And my front line kind of collapsed here, to be honest. These Graveguards with great weapons and other guys were able to get there. And these Iron Drakes are still steady, even though they're down to 10 models and only, 300 HP it looks like. So the Slayers come back after kind of cleaning up these zombies a little bit, and they're going to just lay the smackdown on this Vargulf if they stay engaged with it. My opponent was very on top of microing that, but I've kind of devolved to a little bit of a Dwarf Death Star here, which also benefits my Vampire Count's opponent because he does have, the Invocation of the Heck. You can see the dwarves are fighting hard in here. They're working their way to the necromancer. And what's really nice is I do have the saturation here where the dwarves, there's the Iron Drake torpedoes laying the beat down here, getting that Vargulf almost to the state of crumbling, but again, he gets on them and does a little bit of work. So, but the Slayers are here, they're ready to respond, and they should be able to get him. You can see that Grombrindle attack hits for about 15 to 20% of his HP, but they're so fast. They have 80 move speed, and they can just take off like nothing. And he did also use an Invocation of Nehek, which may bring his leadership out of the pits, but these 6 Iron Drakes here are continuing to shoot, so hopefully they'll be able to crumble him shortly. The front line, though, is looking a little bit scary. He still has Skeleton Warriors, which, obviously aren't a huge threat, but he still has 74 Graveguard with great weapons here. Thankfully, I do have the Warriors with Dragonfire Pass. I have a Runesmith here who's in very good health. I still have some Grumbling Guard here, so 28, so they're providing that nice Vigor aura. They're getting in there and fighting to the death, so these guys are definitely troopers. And let's go ahead and see, was I able to get that Vargulf? Looks like the Vargulf was able to get away and actually catch my Master Engineer who had fled earlier, but that definitely sucks because he could have came back and made a bit of a difference. But he is crumbling. The really low leadership on these guys definitely takes its toll, but pretty strong and fast, and he's been really effective at microing because a lot of my units got separated during the route, and you can see he's chasing them down and making sure they don't come back. But I do have that the Iron Drakes here continuing to just fire away, and I was leaving the Slayers here. I was like really wanted to protect these guys, so wherever that Vargulf was going, I was just kind of mirroring with the Slayers. And then, of course, the Iron Drake torpedoes are getting in here and are really helping to put down this Necromancer. It's crumbling now. And, I would have had trouble getting my dwarves through all the fodder here. And you can also see Papa Grombrindle in here just laying the smackdown. It's kind of funny. I just call everyone that's kind of cool Papa. And it looks like he freaking slays that Necromancer. Not the best death animation. It kind of just glitched there and looked like it collapsed. But the Slayers are doing a good job. They're just patrolling. And obviously, I saw this Vargulf coming from a mile away. So they're able to kind of form their battle lines and get ready. And I am sending these Iron Drakes over here to deal with this incoming Vargulf. So let's see if they're able to get a volley or two. And it looks like they will. You can see the punishing damage of that. And most of his troops, especially considering the Red Duke has been dead for so long, are starting to crumble. But look at them just run over those Grumbling Guard there. So he definitely goes out like a champ, this Vargulf. But, the rest of the Dawi here should be able to clean him up as he is melting. So that was it. It was definitely a fun game. Very cool army composition for my opponent. It was unique. I hadn't seen anyone really use Vargulfs in a long time, but he was very effective at microing them, and when I did pressure them, he would run them back through a skeleton fodder and then re-engage them on appropriate targets. Also, he seemed to have plenty of armor piercing. The Graveguard here did pretty well. The Sternsmen are a must-bring regardless of the matchup, in my opinion, just with how good their stats are and their regeneration. Didn't really get to see the Red Duke shine. He was getting pressured pretty aggressively, and you can saw he took some really mean Iron Drake volleys as well as a few Grombrindle axes to the dome piece that definitely put him down. But the Banshee too, you guys saw that definitely did not work out well. But other than that, very well played on my opponent's part. You guys see the Slayers, and again, the kills in this game, I mean, these guys all look like MVPs because he had so many skeletons, but I would say the Iron Drakes really, really carried their weight, and it was a lot of fun using them. So I hope you guys enjoyed that Dawi cast, and looking forward to playing more games. Have an excellent night, guys, and take care.